Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the introduction. And this is my great pleasure to introduce Professor Richard Zare. He has been the Marguerite Black Wilbur Professor of Natural Science at Standford University for over 45 years. On top of focusing on one scientific interest, he and his group continue to pursue transformative research ranging from reaction dynamics to innovative mass spectrometry methods. His most recent work centers on understanding the interaction on the surface of very small water droplets. So this environment has shown unexplored behavior that Professor Zare will share with us today in his presentation. Please welcome Professor Zare. Thank you.
Appreciate. And what a pleasure to be here and have this opportunity to speak to you all. I thank you for this invitation. I'm going to actually speak to you primarily about water droplets can cause nitrogen fixation. This is work that's sponsored by the Air Force Office of Scientific Research through a MURI program, of which Teresa Head Gordon and I are members. Some people wonder where Standford is. It's about 24,000 miles from here. And I'm not kidding. This is work that is very much that I'm going to specifically talk to you about. It started when Professor Chanbasha Bashir from King Fahd University of Petroleum and Minerals visited us this summer, joining my postdoc, Dr. Xiaowei Song, who came back with me from Fudan University when I had to close my satellite lab there. Okay? And so let us now begin. So we need to start with what's nitrogen fixation? What do we mean by this? Hopefully a lot of you have come across this term. Nitrogen fixation refers to any natural or industrial process that takes nitrogen in the air, free nitrogen, which is, a relatively inert gas. After all, it has a triple bond, right? And combines it chemically with other elements to form nitrogenous compounds that plants can absorb, such as ammonia, urea, nitrates, and nitrites. And it's very, very important to do this. Now, initially, this has been all done by nitrogen-fixing microbes in the soil, but there aren't that many of them. And seriously, people thought that given the rate of growth of the population, that we were going to face starvation, Malthusian catastrophe. And what saved us was chemistry through being able to find industrial ways to make fertilizers. We'll get to that. So first of all, why do plants require nitrogen? What do they do with nitrogen? It's a key component of course, amino acids. Amino acids build peptides. Peptides go on to form proteins. Proteins and enzymes. We just heard from Professor Ariawasha how important that is to have that. And we know that in ourselves and in all living things. What else? It's an important component of chlorophyll. Why plants are green, right? It's necessary for photosynthesis. And it's also a key component in things like nucleic acids, which is how we get our genetic code. Okay, we really need nitrogen, no question. But N2, pretty inert. What to do? And the answer came about through making fertilizer, primarily through the production of ammonia, NH3. And this is showing you the chemistry of N2 molecule plus 3 hydrogen molecules, 3H2, going to form 2 NH3 molecules. Okay? And here we can now talk about some of the things, how they're done. Once you have NH3, you can react it with nitric acid, and you can form ammonium nitrate. Excellent fertilizer, unfortunately also an excellent explosive. Okay, so both are true. What else? Urea. Urea is quite popular, okay? And here we see it being combined with carbon dioxide, ammonia, to go on and make a compound NH2C double bond O, NH2 again, plus water. That's urea. And the Haber-Bosch process actually has serious environmental drawbacks. Let's try to understand this as to what's going on. This is what Fritz Haber started in about 1909, and it took Bosch many, many years to perfect it. And indeed, the world really uses the Haber-Bosch process to make ammonia, primarily. Okay, how does this happen? The Haber-Bosch process runs under high pressure and high temperature conditions. What am I talking about? 100 to 200 pounds per square inch. Remember, 15 pounds per square inch is atmospheric pressure. 400 to 500 degrees centigrade. 100 degrees centigrade is where water boils, okay? It's sufficient to break the N triple bond N, which is really strong, okay? You also need hydrogen. Where does the hydrogen come from? The hydrogen primarily comes from natural gas, from methane, CH4. And they treat this with steam. Okay, steam plus methane is shown here, makes carbon monoxide, CO, plus 3H2. Okay, so we get now some hydrogen from this, which is what we need. What are we going to do with the CO? That's carbon monoxide, that's poisonous, we don't want that. So we treat it again with more steam and a nickel catalyst, and we turn it into CO2 plus H2. I should have mentioned the Haber-Bosch process also requires a catalyst, primarily a magnetite, an Fe3O4 to make it go. Okay, so we get some idea. And understanding that catalytic processes matter, I think settled, but still under debate. And there's all types of other clever things, like the use of MOFs, which perhaps to do this. And here I'm looking to Professor Yagi, and hoping more will happen that way. Okay, let's continue. So, here now there are some, to me, arresting facts. It is estimated between 1.8 and 2.1 tons of carbon dioxide are emitted for every ton of ammonia synthesized. Okay? And you see why. I've shown you the chemistry. In 2021, the amount of ammonia produced exceeded 150 million metric tons, corresponding to roughly 300 metric tons of carbon dioxide that has to be released, okay, formed. It is estimated that the synthesis of ammonia accounts for more than 2% of the global energy consumption in the world, okay, and 1% of the carbon dioxide found in the Earth's atmosphere. This makes it not eco-friendly. Appreciate this? So people are looking for alternative ways to try to get around this. And of course, I'm here now to try, well, you might think, God, this lecturer, he's really gone off the track. He's supposed to talk about water, and I'm telling you instead about nitrogen, okay, ammonia. What's the connection? Well, I hope to show you that there can be a connection, and here's the connection. We're going to now run an experiment in the lab in which we're going to take nitrogen as the nebulizing gas, and we're going to spray water. Okay, this is like 10 microliters per minute water. Look at the diagram. This is like a, how to say, atomizer perfume bottle. Spritz it out, okay? And we're going to spritz it onto a mesh. It's going to be a graphite mesh, which we've coated with actually this magnetite, Fe3O4, and actually some naphthalene as well. That's a fluorinated polymer which has a backbone that's also a sulfur, oxygen, hydrogen backbone, okay? And we're going to actually look at it with a mass spectrometer. I want to make sure you're all familiar with a mass spectrometer. It's some type of device that actually looks at the mass to charge ratio of charged particles that go in it. It's blind to neutrals, but it sees charges, either positive or negative, depending how you run it. And we can run it so that we can find out and actually shatter things apart further. It's called mass spec, or tandem mass spectrometry, to really see what we have. So it's just going to be a detector. It's not making the process happen. It's our detector, okay? And let's see now what we see. And here are the results of this process. And if you look, you'll see a couple of things. You'll see the formation, of hydrazine. You'll see the formation of ammonia. You will see, and of course it gets sodiated and potassiated because the water is never pure water. When it goes through various tubes along the way, it picks up stuff like that. Okay, we're seeing the ions in this, and that's compressed nitrogen. Well, what about instead just using, air? Look, the same thing. Why? Because air is mostly nitrogen, right? So no surprise. And oxygen's not interfering with the process. Okay, so we have this now very easy. And it's what I think a number of us would call a green chemistry, because we're using water and we're using air to make ammonia, to fix nitrogen in this process. And I also want to emphasize to you, did you notice, we do not shine light on this process. This is not photochemistry, neither IR or UV. We can do it in the dark. It works perfectly well. It is also not using an electric field. This is not electrochemistry. There's a lot of work on electrochemistry in this area. This is not. But obviously, as we know very much from Professor Warschau, that chemistry involves electrons moving around. There's electrostatics that has to be involved. So there's going to be some type of electrostatics before we're done. But it's going to come from the water itself. We have replaced the hydrogen from methane with hydrogen from water. There's a lot of advantages to doing that, okay, if it can work. Let's go on. Oh, what about if we just turn off the nitrogen? What if instead we just turn off the catalyst? Done both. Compressed nitrogen without the catalyst. Hey, nothing. Need the catalyst. I need to trap the nitrogen on the catalyst. And iron oxide, after all, Fritz Haber showed it long ago, helps bind nitrogen. Okay, maybe other better things, but this is a simple thing to do. Okay, and instead, if I were to use helium or argon, of course, the effect would go away too. I need nitrogen to ever get ammonia. Otherwise, where can it come from? Nitrogen's not soluble much at all in water, so that's not a good idea. Okay, so here we go. Here's the ammonia yield. And I'm giving it to you in nanomoles per second per square centimeter of the area that it's hitting, okay? And the value is achieved at room temperature with no applied voltage and no irradiation. And now, seriously, it remains to be determined whether this process can be successfully brought to an industrial scale in a commercially viable manner. I am able to tell you about this process because just a couple of weeks ago, we were able to convince, finally, Stanford to patent this in terms of making a patent disclosure so you understand. Otherwise, I couldn't do this. But I've had a lot of trouble with the Stanford's Office of Technology Licensing. They kept asking me, well, what will be the cost per ton of ammonia that you'll make? And I'm doing little water droplets, and I don't know. I could make up numbers, but I don't know the answer. So you face these types of problems. And I'm sorry, their long-term vision is not very long in these matters. They want to get patents and immediately sell them to somebody else and so forth and make money. That's what they're all about, it seems. I'll go on. How does this actually happen? Okay, let's go through this, and it'll just take me a little while to go through this process. So I'm trying to show you now in this diagram. We've been very fortunate to have done density functional theory calculations. Now, that's not the greatest thing, but it's enough to allow us to get some idea of what's happening. So this will give us some picture of what's happening. Here we go in, and let's see if I can do this point. Here it is, nitrogen coming onto the surface. This is N2 absorption. And then what do we see next? Okay, we see it sticking, okay, end on. Then, and this bond will elongate. we see it transferring H3O plus and electron minus, and we'll talk more about this, to picking up a hydrogen. It's becoming hydrogenated. And as it goes on, it becomes more hydrogenated and bends over like this. We go through a process going on where actually we will actually start to escape the first ammonia and have this left over, which will itself finally get fully hydrogenated again and again go off. So we'll get off our ammonia molecules. You see what I'm trying to show you with this, I hope. Okay, and now, here's the calculation. This is going to be a plot of free energy, delta G, okay? And this is going to be a reaction coordinate. And we're going to try to show you, here is nitrogen coming in. The star is going to represent the surface. I hate this notation, but it seems to be standard in the community. Star to me always meant excited state, but it appears that the surface community uses it to mean the surface. Okay, I can't do anything about it. I just live with it. Okay, so here it is. It goes down. And in fact, let's actually click through this and see. N2 on this Fe3O4 surface is estimated to be slightly fizzy-sorbed with a binding Gibbs free energy of minus 0.12 eV. Okay, and an interatomic distance, okay, now it starts to extend. Let's go on. Next, as a result of adsorbed N2 on the surface, it experiences elongation of the NN triple bond by about 0.02 angstroms with respect to the calculated distance for an isolated N2 molecule. It's now ready for our next step, okay? Our next step is the first hydrogenation step is estimated to be about 0.2 eV downhill. So it wants to go. You get where I'm going? Okay, now the next step is a big step. We have to go uphill here. Where? We're going to go up here. We're going to add more hydrogen again. And the second hydrogenation step has a Gibbs free energy of minus 0.13 EV, okay, relative to downhill relative to this. So that's also happy to do this, okay? So we've gone uphill, we've gone downhill. Now we have to go uphill again, okay? Here we are. And that's going up by about 0.55 EV. Now, that's a lot. But I'll try to show you that at the interface of water, not bulk water, but water droplets, okay, you have very large electric fields. I'm sorry, I wish Teresa Head Gordon is here. If she is, identify. No. Okay, because she's calculated this with other people and big electric fields. We've actually worked with Professor Wayman at Columbia to measure it. Very large electric fields. You get this in biology anytime you have a membrane, okay? And as soon as we have hydrophobic air touching hydrophilic water, we actually get a charge separation. And it doesn't matter whether you argue whether it's more minus at the outside or more plus at the inside. There's a separation of charge. As soon as you separate charge, electric field, and it turns out big. Remember, what's holding the hydrogen atom is a proton and electron separated by not that much distance, one Bohr radius, okay? Anyways, let's go on. Let's see if I can. The fourth hydrogenation's downhill. It's by a lot. And it's a rearrangement, and it actually releases ammonia in this process. And then we go uphill again. And I think you're getting the idea. We're going up and up again, and we're now have the process going. So we have this calculated, and it appears to make some sense as to what's happening. Okay, now I thought I want to try to show you why it is that water can cause hydrogenation. And this experiment was performed last week for you, okay? And it's done by a new postdoc in my group, Dr. Yu Xia. And I want now, if I can, to play the video, and I'm not sure how that happens. Oh, can you do that? Start it? Let's take a look, please, at this video. Okay, let's see what we see. Here's the lab. We're taking now a beaker, and this is deionized water. It's supposed to be quote unquote pure water, but we've talked about that water is never so pure. Anyways, it's a great solvent. We're adding it. Here we go. We're adding it, and we're putting it on a hot plate. If you'll notice, because we're going to heat it up in a bit to make water vapor. We're going to use a hydrogen peroxide test strip that has horseradish peroxidase and a dye. And if it turned blue, it means a reactive oxygen species interacted with it. I don't see blue, I see white. I hope you saw the same. Okay? Now, let's cover this up and let's heat it. Okay? And this is just a cover glass, right? A watch cover. And we now are going to put on a Peltier cooler, something that makes it cold, which will allow us to condense the vapor. People have said, oh, Dick, what you do all the time is you do triboluminescence in which you, by friction, cause some charge. This is not friction. This is going to be condensation, okay? Or not much friction anyways. And we're doing this 15 times faster now because otherwise it's like watching paint dry. Not interesting. And I think now we're done. And now let's take off this, okay? And here's our strip again, another strip. Here's the condensed water. See the water's condensed? Okay, let's move it around. Well, you may not be able to see it yet. Let's see. Hopefully you see something. Okay. Let's actually see what happened to the water. Some of the vapor goes back and condenses into the water. And so there'll be a little change, but hardly any. Okay? See? Nothing much. The hydrogen peroxide concentration is less than 2 parts per million. I'm reading it off the scale there. There are other ways to do this, and I could go on and on about this, but hopefully you get the idea. This really does, little water droplets are very different than bulk water. Bulk water doesn't show this effect at all. Little water droplets are showing the formation of reactive oxygen species. Okay? Let's see if I can go further. I want to show you yet one more thing with this experiment. And if this didn't surprise you, I hope the next thing will cause some surprise. What if we now add carbon dioxide along with our nitrogen? We can either dissolve it in the water, which also works, or just put it back in the gas. And now we'll blow it onto a different catalyst. I'll go through what this catalyst is. It's a different catalyst, okay? And we're going to, same thing, we're going to now attempt to apply a potential to our catalyst to see whether or not we need it into our mass spectrometer. And so we see the schematic diagram that's in A, and the photograph of the sonic spray apparatus that's in B. And I'm just using the gas. It's like I'm just using the gas to move the droplets along. Okay. What do we see? Well, we came back. What was this? Oh, I'm showing you that if we varied the voltage, we found out to our delight, you don't need any voltage at all. Okay, it works perfectly happy at 0 volts. So you don't need to apply voltage to anything. Okay, all the action will come from the water droplets. And what do we see? Urea. We are producing urea directly from nitrogen and carbon dioxide and water on a catalyst. It is a quite interesting system because it's a heterogeneous catalytic process that involves 3 phases: the gas phase, the liquid phase, and the solid catalyst. All have to happen together to make this system work. And it does, okay? And as I'm showing you here, and I hope you're starting to see the urea dimerizes some and other things that go on. Okay, and what more can we tell you about it? We varied the CO2 to N2 ratio, and we find out it's best when it's 1:1, which is actually stoichiometric for forming what you expect, the urea. Okay, and we've also looked at the temperature. And yes, it's actually better if we heat the catalyst up to about 70 degrees or so. But it works fine at room temperature also. But it does get better at somewhat warmer. But that's not hard to do. That's not, how do I say, not the same as the Haber-Bosch process at all. Okay? And here's the conversion rates. And I'm showing you what they are in millimoles per gram of catalyst per hour at 25 degrees centigrade and at 65 degrees centigrade. And believe it or not, to my knowledge, this exceeds the best electrochemistry production of urea. That's interesting, okay? No applied external voltage, no photoexcitation. How does this work? Well, again, you're not going to be too surprised by this, I think. Okay, let me not go off the stage, we'll see. Okay, this is a DFT simulation for urea synthesis process. The CO2 will first bind, and we're going to use two catalysts, copper oxide and bismuth oxide. Here's the copper oxide surface followed by N2 side absorption on the bismuth oxide, okay? Water microdroplets provide the hydrogen to complete the synthesis process, and I'm showing you again the whole structure like this, okay? And here it is. According to previous studies, okay, N2 absorption and activation is the rate-limiting step for the N2 reduction. We use this bismuth oxide to be an active chemical absorbent for N2 under ambient conditions due to its oxygen vacancy. Therefore, water droplets can help to increase the chance in the area for the physical contact between N2 and Bi2O3, thereby overcoming the low solubility of N2 in aqueous solution, okay? And once N2 is chemically absorbed by this thing, the triple bond will be lengthened and activated. We've gone through this before. Under ambient conditions, the associative mechanism takes the predominant role over the dissociative mechanism to stepwise hydrogenate this thing. We've seen that before. And the positive detection of the ammonia product is showing, see, we're seeing ammonia also being formed. I can't turn that one off, right? It's showing the evidence of this associative mechanism-driven process. We speculate that water is the major source for the reducing hydrogen coming from H3O plus and H2O minus or OH minus, whatever, at the water, air-water interface. Let me make a comment to you for you to think about. This will really bother people, unfortunately, who take chemistry in high school, or even, for that matter, freshmen in college. You're taught all the time that Kw, the product of the H plus concentration times the OH minus concentration, is 1 times 10 to the minus 14. And that's why we say neutral water, which is the negative logarithm to the base 10 of the H plus concentration. Neutral water has a pH of 7. Now, I'm telling you, at the water interface, it is very likely that Kw is actually much larger than 1 times 10 to the minus 14. I'm also telling you, and Ari, I hope you agree with this, the dielectric constant's not 78, it's something else. Okay, and all these things are going on. And the result is quite amazing. Water is both more acidic and more basic at the same time at the interface. Oh, okay. That's not what your teacher wants to hear in high school at all. You're supposed to have a simple answer to these questions. It's not simple at all. You're starting to hear. Okay, well, go on. Okay, the activated nitrogen molecules can further promote CO2 reduction and they get the CN bond formation. I'm showing you this because of the previous experiments that revealed that the external potential does not substantially facilitate the urea production. It is hinted that the driving potential is self-powered simply from the spraying process. And mounting evidence has confirmed that the theoretical claim about the existence of an ultra-high electric field, here, look, 10 to the 9th volts per meter across the air-water interface of microdroplets, which is sufficient to induce spontaneous redox reactions. We have seen tons of different redox reactions at the interface. And time doesn't permit me, I think, to tell you all about them. But they really is so. All types of things we see. We see such things as, for example, pyruvic acid, or lactic acid going to pyruvate. Things like that, which in the body we require enzymes. But I'm telling you, at the air-water interface, you don't need enzymes. Water will do it. So, much additional work needs to be done to determine whether this process can be a practical source of fertilizer production. But the work presented demonstrates that water microdroplets can cause new chemistry to happen, such as nitrogen fixation under mild conditions and in less than a millisecond. Okay? That's the flight time of the droplet. It's so different. And the potential seems large And the question is, can it be realized? Well, time will tell. But I don't know what time I have here. But okay, we have a sense then of what this is like. There's much more to say about water droplets. My guess is that is actually, this is the first time I've given this talk, and I didn't know how long it would run. My guess is important to show you again. We have submitted these papers, okay, for publication. Now, if they're accepted, they'll suddenly get embargoed, and I won't be able to give you this talk. But hopefully it's recorded now, and everyone can hear what I'm saying. And you get very much the sense of what's happening here, and I'm very grateful for the work that's gone into this, and much more is to happen. Okay, so let's go on. Where does the reactive oxygen species come from? And we postulate that reactive oxygen species, ROS, comes from the contact electrification in which hydroxyl radicals are formed. That the OH minus goes to OH, or that H2O dimer goes to H2O plus, and an electron comes off, and the H2O taken twice plus is really OH complexed with H3O plus. Not the so-called water dimer cation that some people keep talking about, though it has the same formula. Okay, do we have any evidence for hydroxyl radicals in water microdroplets? I think that's a fair question to address. And the answer is, you betcha. We do. Plenty. Okay, here's one. You can use something called salicylic acid to capture it, and we've done that. Or you can use caffeine to capture it, and we've done that. Or you can use something called tempo. This is a radical scavenger. We've done that, and it works. I don't know how much more I'm going to show you. We're showing you that you can actually start to form it, stuff like this. Okay, observation of OH dot with mass spectrometry. And I'm showing you just spraying water allows you to see this. Water does this. Okay, the water droplets do this. And it's natural. Okay, there's been claims that all we're doing is using the ozone and the polluted air that you find at Standford to make this happen. Okay, and here's the claims of that. Sure enough, ozone tends to make this process go. But I don't think this is really quite so, because now, with the help of Masoud Miragardi and Mohammed Mufidfar, okay, in my lab, we have published this recently, showing that water microdroplets are able to generate hydrogen peroxide by themselves. Now, we've also seen other things that help them, but by themselves, they'll make this happen. And here's an example. We spent the money, I'm sorry, it's costly. We got 99.999% pure nitrogen. And then we passed it through water, and we passed it through an ozone scrubber, and we have an ozone meter. And when we finished, we couldn't detect any ozone, okay? And we're spraying it, as you see here. And what do we see? Now, using NMR, nuclear magnetic resonance, and having learned from Dr. Ad Bax at NIH how to do NMR of this type of material, we're showing you that we see hydrogen peroxide being formed, okay? And ozone levels being monitored. We see all this. What else do we see? We see if we change and we start to add oxygen, we watch the hydrogen peroxide go up. Why? We also see that O2 comes off as O2 minus, picks up an electron. I'm trying hard to get you the idea that, and people in physics know this all the time, two things that touch each other, like cat's fur and a lucite rod, get charged. They rub them, but you don't need to rub them. If just contact will make this happen as well. It's called contact electrification. And I'm going to show you this. Here is glass. Here is water. We have added this material. It has a name. You can read it. I'm not going to say it. It forms this, which is actually fluorescent. It fluoresces orange, okay? Or you can see it absorption. I forget which right now. Anyways, look, you can see it. See? And this is diffusing away from the interface, as shown here. And so, and believe me, there's no gas going into this, okay? Particularly, we can say gases are absorbed in the water, but no. We've taken a lot of effort to this. Okay, so it really happens. Now, that it happens so much like this. Let me go and give you another aspect to this, if I might. Okay, I want to show you about the universality of this. But first, I want to show you that you can use what's called Nisa glass, conducting glass, put a water droplet on, and you will see a current. You'll see electrons are coming off. You can measure it if you want with a picoammeter. We've done that. Okay? And I guess that's sort of where as far as I wanted to take it. But I also wanted to tell you, we've also looked at dust particles. Dust particles condense water, get same things what I showed you before. They get covered with reactive oxygen species. It's very important. And there are all types of consequences of this, including, I think, health consequences, which I wanted to talk to you about sometime, concerning how it's a new way to actually stop the spread of influenza A and COVID. And I could go on at length about that, but that's for another talk or another time right now. I hope I've given you some idea now how water droplets are really unlike water. Just, again, follow up what Rich Sakeley was saying, opens a new world as to what's possible. And so we're very much feeling the same way. There's so much more to still learn about water. Yes, it's been studied for a long time, but there's much more still to learn about it. And thank you all for coming and listening to me.